in Montana.
Thanks, AJ. I knew I could count on you.
I think it's the western part of Montana. So this is what you get when you join live. You get all this extra content.
Yes.
No one gets this. This all gets cut.
Valuable.
This all gets cut from the YouTube video. This is extra content for you. All right.
People are now wondering why they didn't just watch this on YouTube.
You know, we don't need all that. We don't need that level of hate. All right. Let's see if I remember how to do this part. Hello, everyone. My name is AJ Kuftik. I am a product manager here at Expedient. I want to thank you all for joining us today. Today, we're going to talk the cloud forecast and where we see things going in 2022. Today with me, we have Bob Evans from CloudWars. We also have Mike Fulton from Expedient. We were supposed to have Gene Torres today from Zerto, but he had a family emergency come up. We wish him the very, very best. By the way, all of this is being recorded. So if you want to go back to it, you want to maybe go at the end of, 2022 and watch this again and see how wrong or right we were, you can absolutely do that. This will be available on our website, go.expedient.com/webinar replays, youtube.com/expedient, instagram.com/_expedient, and linkedin.com/company/expedient. Go ahead, give us a follow on all of those and help us bring this message out to the world. If you have questions, please enter those down about here into the Q&A panel. That helps us keep track of all of the questions and make sure that they get answered. You have all three of us here today, so pick our brains. I have hot takes if you'd like to know them. So does Mike, so does Bob. So if you would like to know what we're working on for 2022, what we see the industry working on for 2022, please go ahead and enter those down here. And with that, we'll get started because I have questions. I get to host today. But Mike, Bob, we've done this now 3 times. Bob, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself one more time for the people?
Sure, AJ, thank you. It's a pleasure to be with you, everybody. 2022 is going to be a year unlike anything we've ever seen before. And I think all the cool stuff that happened over the last couple of years in the cloud will seem like child's play relative to what's coming up next year. So really looking forward to learning some things from Mike and AJ today.
Great. And I'm Mike Fulton. I am a digital strategist and head of commercial strategy here at Expedient. Part of my job is to have conversations like this, to go out and understand what's going on in the cloud industry and learn from other experts in the field and help share that with folks that we talk to. So excited to be here with you today. And like Bob says, it's been a fun ride the last several years in this industry, and better hitch up because it's going to go fast.
So since the last time we've all spoken, ransomware has ramped up very, very quickly in terms of a topic being talked about. It's been a thing for a long time, but it's ramped up a lot in IT as a topic and as a concern. So we find that complexity seems to be the biggest blocker. So Bob, what's kind of sort of the best way for companies who want to respond better to ransomware, but not necessarily upend everything that they do?
Yeah, AJ, this is in some ways, I think this is a disappointing aspect, right? That you get this thing, as you've said, it's been around for a while and it's gotten worse and worse. Why haven't, with all the incredible things that businesses are able to do now, surviving the last 21 months, turning their operations upside down, changing their workforce to be able to work from anywhere overnight, and yet cybersecurity continues to get relegated, I think, to it's not a top priority. What people say, well, it is important, but it's not as important as this. It's not important as that. So it just slides down. I think it's kind of a bad reflection on the mindset. I think, AJ, of some business people that they think it won't happen to me. I'm not interesting enough. I couldn't be a target. But more and more, the bad guys are going to go where the vulnerabilities are. And I think they just see there is lots of vulnerabilities out there on this side. And I also want to pin the blame a little bit on the tech community because it's not an easy solution. And I don't see anybody's really put their hand up and said, I'm going to help my customers find a way to really lock this down and, tell the bad guys to go somewhere else.
I think, Bob, to your point, right, one of the things that is happening in this space is as a tech leader, there are just so many alternatives, so many options, right? There are so many different things we need to put in place from a capability perspective to help secure all of our different environments in new and different ways. But every vendor has a different area of expertise that they bring to the table, right? So when you think about a single capability, say a firewall, for example, and you have 5, 6, 10 different vendors in that space, each offering a different set of capabilities, some better, some worse. Now you multiply that by the 10 to 15 different major capabilities you need to truly protect your environment. The sheer magnitude of decisions you have to make as a tech leader becomes enormous, right? And one of the things I think when I used to work in on the customer side at big Fortune 100 companies, and one of the things that we always struggled with was truly making sure that we were getting the right capabilities. We wanted the best capabilities, and we wanted capabilities that would scale to the size and scale of what we needed, being the kind of company that really had a bullseye on its back. And that's just a really, really hard challenge to crack. And for me, what I think we as tech leaders need to do is bring it back to the basics. Keep things as simple as possible without being too simple, right? And so I think really understanding what are those core capabilities that we need to protect our environment, whether that be a multi-cloud firewall that covers our perimeter, regardless of where that perimeter is in today's day and age, or whether that be endpoint protection that protects our servers and our devices, or whether that be micro-segmentation, which is a core capability to help us limit the blast radius and protect our absolutely most critical assets. I think really making sure that we've got the right core capabilities and we get those right, and then making sure that we bring that together and provide visibility to what's going on in our environments, to me, is absolutely critical. We talk about, AJ and I have talked about it several times on these webinars, the protect, detect, recover approach that we recommend here at Expedient. Because that last piece I didn't mention, recover, yeah, it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when, with the rapid escalation of sophistication of the cyber attackers. We know somebody's going to get in somewhere. There are so many different places they can get in. How do we see it? How do we recognize it as quickly as possible? And then how do we recover? Leveraging disaster recovery, leveraging immutable backups and things like that to help us get back up and running and protect our business. I think we've got to really get this simple, stop making it more complex than it has to be, and put some really strong capabilities in place to take care of this problem.
My brain goes to the cloud native computing foundations like vendor map.
Oh yeah.
There's a security version of it. I don't know if you've ever seen the security version where there's like 5 million antivirus tools. I think that plays into this, right? Because there's a number of different ways to go about doing this, right? And it comes back to that whole protect, detect, recover, scenario. But how do you protect? Here's 10 different firewalls. Here's 10 different microsegments. Here's all of these various different things. How do you actually find that? And I think one of the challenges that we, at least at Expedient, attempt to solve is we have chosen the best of breed. We've done all the testing. We figured it all out. And here's a way for you to actually go be able to do that versus, hey, here's 10 different options. You got to go figure out which one of these you happen to like the most, or which one is the actual best of breed for you, or the best of breed really in the industry. That takes a ton of time. And right now, most people don't have that time. And that's a big, big challenge for a lot of organizations. And kind of speaking to Bob's point earlier around how like security kind of took a back seat. There's a HP report that 76% of teams said security took a backseat to continuity during the pandemic, and 91 felt pressure to compromise security for business continuity, right? It's like, okay, the security stuff, that's cool. but like, we need people to work. I can't deal with all of our procedures and policies and things. I need to get people back online and get them back to work from home, right? We're now all in our various houses. So how do we move forward to get that balance between productivity and security?
AJ, and Mike, I'd love to hear what both of you think about this. I think compounding those findings, AJ, that you just cited from the HP study is the notion that, right, even if that was just a snapshot of a steady state, that's serious enough, those things that they talked about, taking a back seat to continuity. The other side of that, though, is that those businesses are wildly different today than they were probably even when that study was taken, within the last 6-12 months, because everybody's moving more and more into the digital world. As they do that, they get new growth opportunities, new ways of dazzling their customers. But underneath that is, and we open up more and more entry points for the bad guys to get in here. So I wanted to ask each of you along the lines of your question, AJ. Anybody who thinks like, well, I'll put this off till, next quarter, next half. The problem is going to be, I don't know if it's, logarithmically more difficult, but it's going to be wildly, the longer this decision is put off, the dramatically worse it's going to get. And I think too, it speaks to a notion of within corporate organizations. Mike talked about the tech leaders, and they've got all this stuff they're trying to juggle. If this decision and this attempt to, where do we focus? Is this a company-wide focus, or is this just something to put on the IT team? The companies that just try to say it's just an IT issue are the ones that are going to pay, I think, a terrible price. It's got to be seen as a company-wide issue that has to be dealt with. It's not going away, and it touches every facet of their business.
Yeah, I think.
Go ahead, AJ.
So I think this comes back to one of my favorite quotes, which is the quickest way to make something production is to call it temporary. So all of these sorts of choices that get made, it's just temporary. You're never coming back to that. Not ever. No. And by the time you come back, it's like, okay, now we have the big security project and things have to be ripped apart to be put back together in a more secure way. So as you're going forward on your projects for 2022, consider how security fits in from day one. Why does this change? Don't go in and say, oh yeah, we'll put it in and we'll add 2FA later, or we'll add logging later, or we'll add, firewalling in later. You're never going to do that. The only thing that's going to outlive the heat death of the universe is firewall rules. So you just need to understand that, come back to the beginning and think about security from the very beginning. Otherwise, you're never going to actually go get that into place, and it's going to lead to a lot of problems down the line.
Yeah, absolutely would agree. I think you've got to build security in. You've got to build it into your mental models. You've got to build it into your policies. You've got to build it into your testing. It's really that DevSecOps mentality that people are talking about quite a bit now, that I think is critically important, as AJ said, to get it right up front and then keep it up to date on an ongoing basis. I think that's really important. But there are a lot of things that approach that doesn't even cover all the things that you need to do. You still have to take a broader enterprise view of security in addition to the ongoing application focused view. In fact, it's such a fascinating time in the security space. I used to, before joining Expedient, worked for a major insurance company here in town, and we had conversations around cyber insurance. And I think this is a really, really fascinating time from a cyber insurance perspective, because companies are seeing cyber insurance rates go through the roof with the influx of ransomware attacks over the last year. As companies are going back to renew their policies, they're seeing their policy coverage limits cut in half. They're seeing their prices go up considerably, and they're seeing cyber insurance providers put more and more restrictions on companies, saying that if you don't have some of these capabilities in place, I'm not even going to insure you. That was one of the things that a lot of leaders fell back on was, okay, if something bad does happen, I have insurance to cover me. right? Or I have a disaster recovery plan in place that I've never tested, by the way, but I'll just recover from backup, right? So I think you really have to rethink some of those things. You have to test your disaster recovery plans. You have to test your backups. You have to really understand what your cyber insurance coverages, how those are changing in this new age as we go forward into 2022. Because if you're not paying attention to that stuff, you're going to get some big unexpected bills coming up real soon.
And I think the other part of that is, this is, on the flip side, this is a very good thing, because you're starting to see companies having to make decisions, and they're doing it based on some third party coming in and saying that they have to do it, right? Whether that was in the past, it was always compliance. We have to be PCI compliant. In order to be PCI compliant, we have to do all these various things, right? Or we want to be HIPAA compliant or high trust compliant or SOC compliant, and they have to do these things. Now they have that. And now there's a financial incentive for them to go do this because of cyber insurance. And so they're being told, you have to have 2FA on things. We're starting to hear clients say, I have to have 2FA on desktops. I have to have 2FA in places where I've never had it before. We've had to talk about, where can we put firewall rules and make those rules consistent? And how am I auditing those rules? How am I getting that visibility? And those sorts of things turn into financial penalties directly. It's not, oh, hey, you didn't pass this audit and you owe some sort of fine. It's, no, the monthly bill for your cyber insurance or your yearly bill for cyber insurance now goes up. And it's a not small number. And now your CIO and CFO are going, what the heck are we doing? Wait, we don't have that? Wait, it cost me, how much is it going to cost me to change that? $50K a year? How much is it going to cost me to implement? 30. Yeah, go do that. Right? You're starting to see the financial decision being made instead of the technical decision being made. And this is where all of these various pushes into the tech leader space come in, because it now actually affects the business and the amount of money that they're spending that they're not turning into profits, right?
And I would say, if you're a tech leader, there's two statements I'll make. The first is, if you haven't figured it out from the brief conversation we've had, this stuff is hard. Security is hard. But the second statement I'll make is, you don't have to go it alone, right? There are others that have come before you that have shared what they have learned. There are frameworks out there like the NIST cybersecurity framework or the NIST Zero Trust framework that you can leverage to learn on what other industry experts have already learned. There are partners like Expedient and other experts in the field that can help you on this journey. You don't have to do it alone. And that would be my number one thing, right? Is if we're going to stem the tide here, I think we all have to do a better job of leveraging the best of what's come before us, leveraging and working together to solve this problem, rather than trying to solve it again and again, because we'll never catch up, right? If every one of us are solving this problem for ourselves, we will never catch up with the cyber attackers who are sharing all of the time.
Mike, I think that's a terrific point, because in parallel with that, all of these businesses, right, as they're trying to, how do I devote more and more resources to trying to solve this really intractable problem? Whereas I think the wise thing, Mike, like you're saying, is go out and get expert help. But as they wait, the needs for them to deploy their teams and their resources toward growth opportunities and to connect into all the new digital pathways for the way the economy works now, that inaction is not only stalling the point at which they're going to try to get security under control, but it's also paralyzing them from being able to redeploy a lot of their people toward growth initiatives and the new digital way that business works. So it's just an awful situation. And I think inaction isn't wise. Well, let me find some better solution. It's quite damaging, because the world's just moving faster than it ever has before.
So speaking of the world moving fast, we all moved home very quickly, right? We all grabbed things from our desks and ran home. And so we start to see this push into the hybrid workforce, right? And we have enough security challenges just securing the stuff that sits inside of offices and inside of our data centers. Since remote work isn't going anywhere, what are the best ways for companies to actually be able to enable this hybrid workforce, given that, internet connectivity might be spotty in places like this? How do we actually enable that going forward?
Michael, I'll yield to you.
Go ahead.
No, I'm to you, Mike.
All right. So from my standpoint, I think we all have to think about work a little bit differently, right? And I think it really comes back to that simple mantra that we have over and over and over again around people, process, and technology, right? I think we have to think about how we interact with people in new and different ways. We all have conversations about how wonderful it is when we are able to get together in person. How do we build opportunities for us to engage and collaborate in unique and different ways with the people that matter in our lives, even when we can't get together face to face? I think that's been a wonderful and interesting journey that we've all been on over the last 18 months. But we have to also think about the personal side of this, and how do we make sure we're making time for ourselves and our own mental health, given the fact that we're staring at these Zoom boxes all day long, right? We have to account for that. From a process standpoint, I think we have to build in more opportunities for collaboration into our processes. We have to leverage the collaboration tools like Teams or Slack in new and different ways. We have to understand how this new environment creates changes in the way that work processes flow through our organization. When we think about, we were having a conversation with our client advisory board a few weeks ago, we were talking about the purchasing process. How has the purchasing process changed as they've navigated the pandemic? How has the need to reach out to different kinds of suppliers changed when you have supply chain problems and you can't get the equipment that you need, or you can't get the office supplies that you need? How do you navigate that and work through that using different approaches? So we have to reconsider all of our approaches, I would say, as well. And then from a technology perspective, we already talked a lot about security. I think we have to really think about extending security into the home and doing different ways. And I think we have to be open to new ways of working, leveraging tools potentially like desktop as a service that can help give us the best of both worlds, that ability to have a broad set of flexibility around where we work and how we work, but still can provide the security that an organization might need. So I think on those three fronts, people, process, and technology, that's just a couple of things I would say.
Yeah. AJ, I think Mike covered that all very nicely. I guess the other part that I'd put into this is, you see this happening and companies try to look like, what do we need ourselves? But at the same time, all the issues that Mike described, it's not just getting our own work done internally, but the nature of the work that's coming in, more collaborations across supply chains, customers, partners, other shippers, logistics companies. So the nature of the work that has to be done from home is changing at a pretty rapid pace as well. So I think almost if there's a parallel to the security issue, this is not going to get easier over time. Pushing it off is going to cause you a bigger problem down the road than, trying to grapple with it, get it done the right ways, as Mike outlined there. The sooner that happens, the better, because it's not going to get easier, and it sure as heck isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I'll say this. It's going to be a hard fight if you are a company trying to get your employees to go back into an office on a full-time basis. It's just a real struggle. And I think a lot of people have appreciated the fact that they now have this flexibility. And so instead of demanding that employees come back into the office, there's two angles to this. One, there is the hybrid workforce where I need to be able to enable a consistent experience no matter where people are, right? So if they're, in a coffee shop, at a customer site, they're at home, or they're in our office, the performance of our applications, the performance of the services that they use should be the same or as close to the same as possible, no matter where they are, right? That's one angle to this. The other angle to this is that this is the opportunity for you as an organization to make changes to the way that you work. Right. We've seen how many people have shifted to utilizing cloud services like, OneDrive, Google Drive, Dropbox, Box, all of these file services to actually share data back and forth and sharing links and collaborating live on documents. I talk about this a lot in at least when we talk about our desktop as a service platform, but go look at Office 365's roadmap. A third, if not more, of the Office 365 roadmap is Teams. Just Teams. There's like 5 features for PowerPoint. There's 150 for Teams. Microsoft is putting everything into Teams. Google renamed their things again to Google Workspace, but all of the things that they're doing is to provide this cohesive Google Apps, Google Meet experience to try and compete in this space, because everyone recognizes that remote collaboration is going to be a big, big deal for years to come. And if you're an organization, you have big office spaces and you're staring out at cubes with nobody in them, maybe you should take a look at what to do with those cubes. Maybe you should be taking those cubes and moving them out of the way and building collaboration spaces in the office so that when people come in, they actually sit down and talk to each other, right? Mike mentioned earlier that it's nice to see people in person. We've gone into the office a couple of times. I've gone out to our Columbus data center since things started to open back up a little bit. And it's nice to sit in the same room. It's weird. I don't know if anybody here has gone back to it like an in-person meeting, but you'd notice that the Zoom lag isn't there and things move faster, like a little bit. It's kind of weird, right? You don't get people really talking over each other too much because people can hear and see the real body language of each other. And so that it gets a little bit more free flowing. So consider, how do you enable that experience and that hybrid workforce, but also utilize the office space that you do have as a way for you to get all the things inside your environment that you really need. I think that's getting
collaboration space and building that out properly. Bob, help me out here. I'm blanking on his name. Former CEO of SAP, Bill Mcdermott. Yeah, Bill Mcdermott came out, I don't know, probably a year ago at this point. Time is wild. He came out like a year ago and he said the people with office space are going to be differentiators. And everybody was like, we're all working from home. What are you talking about? And he said, about building this collaboration space and actually making your office a place to go be a collaborative workforce can be a real game changer for people, especially against companies that don't have any of that. And you never actually get to see your coworkers in person. It's a really interesting sort of flip on the, we want people back into the office, but I think it's really, really powerful. And if you're a leader of an organization, tech, business, or otherwise, you should be considering that. Yeah, I couldn't agree more, AJ. I think in this world where we want people to be able to work differently. We're going, as organization leaders, are going to have to provide them with flexibility. And then we're going to have to create environments that they want to be a part of. Right? I don't want people to come back to the office because I'm telling them to go back to the office. I want people to come back to the office because it's a place that they want to be. It's a place that they're excited to be. They feel like they get something out of being in the office, whether it's they're more productive or they're more social or whatever it is that they need to get their job done and be more effective. I want them to be able to get that out of the office space during certain times. I don't need them to get that out of the office space all the time. It's perfectly okay if an organization suggests that you've got the flexibility to go home and work from home when you need to be focused, when you need to be productive for a couple of hours and you need to get something done with no distractions. If that's the right environment for you to be able to do that, you should be able to do that. I think organizations that get ahead are going to be those organizations that provide that flexibility, but provide that office space that people want to go to, want to be a part of for sure.
So we've been talking for 29 minutes now. Let's actually talk about 2022, right? We've talked a lot about what's happened through 2021 and where we see some things going. But what's the big priority going into 2022? Are we still working on cost savings? Have we flipped to looking more at efficiency and operations or reducing complexity? Bob, what's 2022 going to look like? You mentioned earlier, you teased it earlier that like this is going to be a year like no other. So Come on, bring the noise, bring the heat.
Yeah. My AJ, it's interesting. There's nothing wrong with cost savings and efficiencies, and to some extent, the nature of the corporate structure will always push for some of those. But this is where, Mike talked some. You did last question about leadership, and the leadership here has to be one that makes it very clear we're going to build constant efficiencies and cost savings into everything we do, but our focus is going to be on growth. The speed at which the world is moving, the speed at which customer tastes are changing, requirements, expectations, demands, and so on, it's unlike anything before. And if somebody wants to try to sort of, through efficiency, cost cut their way to, dazzling a customer, that's just, I think it's a recipe for failure. So the good thing is that the tools and capabilities now, offered by Expedient, offered by some other companies, give your customers the capability to not have to spend all that time and have these great, talented, IT people doing stuff that's really sort of low value, but instead get them up and out where they can have an impact on customers and the outside world and the growth of the company. And within that, the efficiencies will build up. But I think a company that tries to play the cost-cutting game in 2022 as their lead card, I think that's going to be a bad hand.
I would agree with that completely, Bob. I think as I look at, I'm going to give a shout out to two of my friends over at Gartner who I've had some of these conversations with, Bob Gill and Mike DeRoche. We were having some conversations around what is 2022 going to look like? What are they saying? What are they hearing? And one of the statements they made that really summed it up for me, and I found fascinating, was that they are anticipating that in 2022, what we're going to see is we're going to see a bifurcation of transformation. That's what they called it, a bifurcation of transformation. And what do they mean by that? They mean we're going to see a split where it's no longer going to be just about digital transformation. It's going to be about IT modernization and digitization. And those two things will separate. Those two things will be run in parallel. And I think the reason for that, right, is a lot of organizations are starting to really take a hard look at it and realize that our IT organizations need to get brought up to snuff, and they need to get brought up to snuff now. We talk about cloud. 2021 was the 15-year anniversary of cloud computing. We've been at this for 15 years. And I think, AJ, correct me if I'm wrong here, didn't AWS at reInvent last week state that the number they're putting forward is about 15% of workloads are now in the cloud?
Somewhere between 5 and 15.
Somewhere between 5 and 15, right?
5 and 15. It's been 15.
We got a long ways to go when it comes to modernizing our organizations. And that's not even talking about, again, people, process, and technology, right? It's the cloud, some of the underlying technology we need to modernize, but there's also all of those IT operating model things around how we work, Agile, DevOps. Organizations need to start to really transform those IT organizations and modernize those to be able to support the digital transformations that our organizations are demanding, right? We've got to move faster to deliver the business outcomes that our organizations expect of us. And while cloud and IT operating model transformations are critically important to that, those two things don't deliver business value. All right, I'll say that again. Cloud and IT modernization does not deliver business value, with the exception of maybe potentially some cost savings. But as we already talked, cost savings is not going to win the day, right? No. You have to drive the digital transformation to be successful. That's what's going to drive the business outcomes. But if you want to drive that digital transformation, you got to get your IT shop right, or it's never going to work. And that's what Gartner, I think, is kind of putting forward. And what I think as organizations, we got to get done. We got to get moving. We got to get our IT organizations up to snuff so that we can deliver what the business is demanding.
Yeah, Mike, let me offer an additional take on that, because I sure agree with you. The other side, I think leaders in a company, and whether that's leaders in any part of the organization, but I think it ought to be pushed hard by leaders in the tech side of the company. And that is, I think it's time to digital transformation, the term and that sort of mindset, take that, pat it on the head, say, you know what, we're going to ease you into retirement, because it conveys this notion that that we'll do this, we'll start the transformation, we'll get midway, then we'll finish it, then we're done. And you're not done, right? When you get to the end of it, that's the beginning of the new thing, which is now you're a digital business, a digital enterprise, all of those things. And the transformation gives a false sense of beginning, middle, end. And now we can just cool it. Well, you can't, because the way things are going is not. So I think there's going to be a rethink about digital transformation. And I think it has to extend that, even dropping the digital a little, that's the goal. But the big thing is, how do I become a business that puts the customer at the center of everything and orients all my investment spending priorities around that, from security to work from anywhere. And then the employee experience has to be able to rise up and match that of the customer experience. Because I would defy even two very bright guys like you to name a company that delivers great customer experiences but has crappy employee experiences. I don't think they exist. So all these things happening at once. And that's why I think the transformation, it's time for us to shake that off and get a new mindset or new goal.
I love that perspective, Bob. I mean, you may remember from some of our prior conversations, I think AJ probably does, I teach digital over at Ohio State. And you're exactly right. There is a digital transformation journey that organizations go on, right? But that digital transformation journey is about moving from the enterprise we are today to becoming a digital enterprise, an enterprise that knows how to leverage technology and data to continue to transform our customer experiences, to continue to transform our business models and drive business outcomes. That's the end state. And the actual transformation never ends, right? We're going to be constantly making sure that we're adjusting what our customer experiences need to be to support what our customers want, because our customers are always changing. Yeah. Our customers are always evolving, right? What is good enough today for them is not going to be what's good enough tomorrow. And so we have to get into that new mindset of continuous experimentation, continuous change, continuous growth to be able to support that. So yeah, I love that idea of let's get rid of digital transformation. Let's now become digital enterprises, and let's get moving.
Yeah, listen, I can't tell you how happy that made me, because I've always disliked the term digital transformation, because it assumes that like everything was previously analog and that we haven't had computers for 20 years, and that there is a like transformation and that it ends, right? That you're done and now I'm digitally transformed. I'm now a beautiful digital butterfly, and all of these sorts of things. It needs to continue to go on, and I think what should change. I love that concept of using technology and using the capabilities that we have to actually enable a better customer experience. I actually came up with a couple examples of companies that have potentially bad employee experiences, but really great customer things. One of them might own the largest cloud. But these are the sorts of things that as we go forward, being able to enable your employees to provide better customer experiences. This is the Zappos mindset, right? Getting that having great customer experiences causes customers to come back over and over and over again. And that's why people get into companies like Amazon and Zappos, and they want to use things like Target's curbside pickup and these sorts of things. It's because it enables a better experience. You're using technology, but the customer doesn't care that it uses technology. They care that they get the experience they want, which is, I don't want to go into the store. I just want to hit the button and then things come out and show up in my trunk, right? These are the sorts of things that as you go forward, that's digital transformation, that you don't ever have to call it digital transformation. If you've got a digital transformation project, you failed already. Yeah. You need to be thinking about your projects and how you use technology to get to where you want to go. Those are two different things. And I think, retiring that digital transformation term, I think helps people get over the hump, because they think that they have to transform everything, and really just focusing on the things that actually make a difference is way more important. So in regards to that whole employee experience, there's a lot of companies that have open positions and not a ton of employees with which to delight. Right. So there's a massive skill shortage that's happening here. How do you combat this shortage of skills, right? Because there's job openings everywhere, by the way, careers.expedient.com. These are the sorts of things that are out there and open, and finding talent is still very, very hard. So, Bob, where do you see the skill shortage kind of going here?
AJ, I think this is a fascinating thing. I had a conversation recently with Thomas Kurian, the CEO of Google Cloud, and he said, oftentimes, he said, we'll have a conversation with a big company and they'll say something like, well, we did some internal planning and what we came up with was this idea is to achieve our digital goals, we need to go out and hire 800 data scientists. And they will say to the Google Cloud people, where should we go to hire 800 data scientists? And eventually, of course, the conversation comes around, you don't need 800, you need the power of and the thinking of 800 data scientists. Well, we have 8,000 or 80, whatever the number is. So I think in some ways things are moving so fast and the changes are so great in magnitude these days that it really requires, I think, an extra level of thinking. What are the skills I need to have in-house? What are the skills I need to have in my upfront partners? What are the skills I need to have, building into the future here? And somebody even the other day said, we're finding that titles among some very big high growth companies, they said they're doing away with titles and going more like describing people by their skill. And he said it's much better, right? Because as everybody needs more people who understand data better, well, if you're the vice president of product marketing, what does that say or doesn't say about you? So anyway, AJ, I don't mean to babble, but it's a whole different mindset here about what's going on with skills and people who just think more broadly and are able to see side to side about what's going on in the organization. You want to have maybe a core strength, but you got to be able to see and want to contribute to all those things that are happening in other parts of the company, rather than saying, no, this is my little, silo right here. And, I've got to protect it. And because other people will take my good ideas. It's a wildly different way of looking at stuff, especially as you figure how deeply your customers are going to come into product development, product design, product engineering, how you set up your service teams, and customers are going to be the ones that really are the indicators about the sort of skill gaps that we'll need to fill in 2022.
Yeah, Bob, I think this is a great example. You gave a great example with Google talking about data scientists and being able to support the business outcomes with that. I would provide a similar example with Expedient and our enterprise cloud offering, our ability to take over some of that infrastructure, some of that application support that your team is doing today, and to be able to offload that work to somebody else, the patching, the stuff that you don't necessarily want to spend your time and energy doing. You really want to focus yourself and your team on driving that digital transformation, driving those business outcomes, and really adding value to the business. You don't want to spend your time trying to figure out how a machine learning algorithm is constructed and designed. You don't want to spend your time doing patching on 5,000 different servers. You want to spend your time diving the digital transformation. And one of the things that we say is, if you were to pick up your environment and move a big chunk of it to Expedient, for example, as an enterprise cloud offering, or the Google example that you described, you're able to drive a set of savings from that. But even if you could go to your CFO and get your CFO to commit to increasing your workforce by 30%, right? How are you going to find and staff the people to be able to identify 30% net new people to come in the door? Well, you pick up and you move your workloads over to an environment like Expedient, and you free up 30% of your capacity of your IT organization to go do something else. It's like getting that check from your CFO for a 30% headcount increase.
Yeah. And it happens, Mike, almost instantly, right?
Yeah.
You don't have to go out, find them, recruit them, orient, and so forth like that. In a really tough job market, they're people, they know the company, they like the culture of the organization, and they're really going to like it when you come to them and said, I'm giving you have earned the opportunity to take a higher level, higher value spot in the organization. We want you out on the front edge, dealing with customer facing innovation, and help us build the company we need to become into the future here. And I think in some ways, AJ, like those skills, they go all across the board. I think it's so interesting. I watch on LinkedIn sometimes the profiles of some people used to say, I sell CRM for this company. And now they say, I work with customers to enhance their ability to thrive in the new digital economy. So how do we look at what our skill sets are? How do we describe the outcomes of those skills? And it ranges all across the board. So it's reskilling, upskilling, and I think it's rethinking how we view these notions of skills, capabilities, and so forth. Does it have to be inside? Can a partner do it better? Let's get the partner to do it better, by all means.
By the way, I think a lot of that person who was selling CRM and now they say they enhance customer experience, they're doing the exact same thing. They just got better words for it. I think in a lot of these sorts of situations, leveraging people to do the things that are not your core competencies. We talked about this. I'm going to go back to kind of the beginning of 2021 when we talked to Bob Evans Foods, and they talked about how we, Expedient, are helping them handle the things that aren't their core competencies. They make mashed potatoes and macaroni and cheese. They are not a technology company. The technology enables them to consistently make it and package it and ship it and so on and so forth, and be able to take in orders and all the things that actually go into the process of making and selling these food products. These are not their core competencies. So think about, from your organization's standpoint, what is the actual thing that your company does, right? I've worked at large health insurance companies. Mike worked at large auto and home insurance companies. Technology isn't the company. They're not selling technology. They're selling claims processing. They're selling the actual, payments and deductibles and all those sorts of the actual insurance product is the real thing being sold to an end customer. The technology is what helps them process all of that stuff. Mm-hmm. And so by having this sort of thing, utilizing the technology and getting it into the hands of customers is not necessarily what they do. It can enable some things. Like if I am an auto insurance company, having an app on a phone that can take pictures as part of the claim enables a better claims experience, right? There's no can you text me all the pictures that you took at the accident site? Can you send me your ID card and all this other stuff? Having that all in an application, it all goes directly into the system, and there's no agent that has to be involved, or how do I transfer all these photos and images and that sort of stuff to get the claim processed? You're enabling a better thing. The technology is not what you sell. So leverage another organization to be able to take that on, whether that's a partner who's doing straight managed services on the gear you have on-prem, or a cloud service provider like Expedient that can take it all in and manage it in our environment and do all the capacity planning so you don't have to. And I think that kind of comes back to my last question here. How can we tackle complexity? Because I think there's a massive shift in the industry. Amazon got this close to saying it, everybody. They're almost going to say multi-cloud. They almost did. There was the director of product and IT for United Airlines got this close to saying multi-cloud in an AWS conference. We're so close, right? But as part of that, she mentioned the concept of they looked at multi-cloud and they thought multi-cloud was going to be a good idea. But the complexity of doing so is what led them to standardize everything onto AWS. So it was very interesting to hear, they looked at multi-cloud and said, I don't know about all that, and then said, we're going to do everything on the AWS. So how do we tackle the complexity of a multi-cloud world, given a better definition of utilizing multiple clouds for their best purposes and not trying to shove an application to run across multiples of them?
Yeah. How'd they do? What was it, yesterday or Tuesday?
That was one region. I'm not gonna defend Amazon. It was hilarious to watch them be on fire for 6 hours. But shout out to all the people who had operationally fixed them. It's not your fault, I don't think. I hope it isn't. But that sort of thing is, you're seeing this organization and this region basically be offline for 6 hours. Most people have had a large outage in their lifetime. I've been a part of a few, right? Where you're running your own infrastructure and you've had a large outage. These are the sorts of things that happen from time to time, right? So it's not oh, hey, they goofed, haha, please look in your own resumes. But Bob, How do we see companies dealing with this level of complexity?
AJ, I think really, in some ways they look at this in a couple different dimensions. One is, yes, there's complexity there, right? And as we dig into, again, looking at what 22 is going to bring, 2023, it'll make what we're going through right now seem sort of calm and placid and almost boring. The complexity will come at a price of it. And I think it's the winning companies in the tech space are going to be the ones that said, hey, I got complexity you couldn't imagine, but I'm going to hide it from you. I'm going to obscure it from you. I'm going to manage it with you. I'm going to help, step this through here. And AJ, without meaning to get like overly artsy fartsy or how about if you're a company in the financial services business that can actually handle complexity and make that a competitive advantage? I'm not only not afraid of it, I'm going to bring it in because I can handle it. I've got better ways to manage it, and I can hide it from people while also giving them all the benefits that comes from this wild stuff. So multi-cloud, come back to planet Earth here. Multi-cloud, I think, yeah, there's some challenges with that, but the complexity, I think, is way it's outweighed significantly by the fact that companies want to be able to do what's best for them in whatever situation it's in. And I don't know, maybe there's some companies that look at this and say, I'm going to go with one single cloud. And maybe that's all going to work out great. I would think they're going to be in the very, very, very tiny minority there, 2% of companies, 1% of companies. I'd be surprised if it's more than that, because
I
the
mean, to
need
your
is
point,
big.
Bob, yeah, I think to your point, Bob, there's a lot of value out of having options, right? We can talk about finding the ideal price for your workload. We can talk about leveraging the most innovative capabilities, the best in class capabilities that are possible out there in the different ecosystems. In the context of the situation we brought up previously, having redundancy and flexibility when something goes wrong, and that ability to navigate through some of that. There's a lot of different reasons why organizations want to go multi-cloud, right? And a lot of benefits to it. And I think the key with the complexity is leverage the uniqueness when it adds significant business value, when it adds significant competitive advantage. And where it doesn't, then what you really want to do in those situations is drive standardization wherever you can, right? In those situations, having, say, for example, in the security world, having a single intent-based policy approach across clouds so that you don't have your security experts trying to figure out all of the different environments and the different nuances between each of the different environments, but instead they're focused on driving the right policies across the organization. Or when it comes to an operations perspective, having a single pane of glass where individuals can see all of the workloads they have running in the cloud, regardless of whether those workloads are sitting in AWS, Azure, or Expedient, for example. That's a lot easier to see that in one place than it is to try to go to each one of those different environments and look up their specific systems, their specific dashboards, and trying to navigate through all that. So there are ways to tackle the complexity of a multi-cloud environment. In fact, I think we've really spent a lot of time at Expedient over the last year focusing on building out a portfolio of solutions we call Expedient Control, specifically designed to make it as easy as possible for people to navigate in a multi-cloud world. Because again, what I would say, and it's kind of a little bit of a throwaway line, but cloud is not a destination. Cloud is an approach. Cloud is an operating model. And when you make that mistake, right, when you think about cloud is AWS, I have to do everything in AWS or I'm not in the cloud, right? But instead think about what value does the cloud add to your organization? What are the elements of that approach that provide value to me? And how am I getting to as much of that value as possible? That's really what we as IT teams need to drive into the organization, that cloud operating model, not a specific destination.
Yeah. And Mike, if one of the things that, as you've described there, that Expedient is able to do is take away from the customer all that complexity of managing multi-clouds, yet give that customer all the advantages of all those different capabilities within those multiple clouds there, then that's one of those, I think you articulated it better than I did. That's one of those advantages. The customer gets the benefit of all that different stuff, but they don't have to be the complexity wizard handling all of it. Leave that to the experts, like your company, that's better able to do that and take the benefits. That's a nice trade-off.
So I do want to thank everyone for joining us for all of our webinars that we've had throughout 2021. Bob, thank you so much for joining us for 3 separate webinars. Please go back to our YouTube page, youtube.com/expedient, go.expedient.com/webinar replays. Go watch the other ones. Bob and Gene had a tremendous amount of insight this year. So thank you so much for coming on to these and really providing a ton of really great, kind of perspectives and angles on things. And Mike, thank you so much for joining us yet again for one of these, for one of our webinars. We will be back in January. We hope you have a wonderfully happy holiday season. If I may, please go to youtube.com/expedient and go find the Christmas Carol one. You can watch it next week. If you're kind of on your, it's going to be quiet soon, right? So just go ahead and watch that. I made some giggles last year. Some people asked me to redo it this year. It's already recorded. You can watch it again. But again, thank everyone so much for joining us. We will see you in 2022. That's another year. And we will see you next year. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Bob. Thanks, AJ.
Thanks.
Bye.